How's everybody?
Good.
Excellent.
I got lunch being brought over at 1. We're gonna be still here at 1.
Lunch is coming, we will be.
At 1?
Is your buying? Are you buying?
Yeah, it's gonna be delivered at 1. We're gonna still be here.
Oh, where you coming from?
Yeah. Shucks.
We'll leave this here just in case they show up. I know the Ann is out of state.
Okay.
I'll leave it right here in case they show up. He might be over flipping sandwiches across the street or something.
Council meeting. I don't know a lot about cryptocurrency and mining for it. Shelley and I were having this discussion. So I'm not going to go in great detail. I think y'all have all had a chance to look into it yourself. I do understand it a little better than I did. I know that there's some concerns statewide about it due to the noise, the amount of electrical, and also, from what I'm understanding, water consumption at this time. But I know that state law changes August 1st, and we thought that as a city, we probably ought to get ahead of this. I've asked Brett Carroll from Conway Corporation to speak to you about the concerns he has as far as electrical in the city. And Brett, I know there's not a lot out there about the water at this time, but if you could just briefly talk to the council about the city.
Well, good afternoon. We talked about the whole crypto mining situation when we did this recent electric rate study. There's a lot of discussion about it right now, and not just in Conway, but across the state. My colleagues, as well as I've talked to them, we have an association of municipal power companies similar to Conway. There's 15 in the state, and our positions are all pretty similar on this. It's something that can be risky. Those businesses in general are very portable. They can be here and be gone relatively quickly. And there are huge, as the mayor mentioned, there are huge consumers of electricity. We had a couple inquiries about this, and the reason they're looking in our state is because Arkansas in general has very low electric rates. And so given the fact that that's 90% of their cost roughly, then they want as cheap electricity as they can get. Because they're such large users of electricity, the ones that we talk to are about 30 megawatts. To give you some perspective, that is 3 times larger than our single biggest customer right now, 30 megawatts. It's substantial. And so to serve a customer like that, you have to build your distribution system. Often they're located right by a substation. You have to do work in there. You have to provide infrastructure to serve their load. And we did some things when we did our last electric rate study. We had our board approved some line extension policies that would require them to pay for all their capital improvements to serve them, which is an important thing because given the portability of their business, they can be here and be gone before you get a chance to recover your investment. So getting them to do that, we did. The line extension policy changes afford us some protections there, but there's some other things as well. You have to make sure you have the capacity to serve them. These operations don't typically bring jobs to our community, and so that's more of an economic development thing. But if you're going to spend a bunch of money, you're hopeful that they're going to bring jobs to your community, and that's not the case with them. You wonder about if all of a sudden you add another 30 megawatts onto your system, what does that do to the transmission grid? You guys have probably seen articles in the paper or in the news about rolling blackouts because of capacity concerns. You could probably do some sort of interruptible rate if there were concerns that you could interrupt them, but still, they're using a lot of electricity, which impacts our grid. An example that we learned of, and this can impact all of our customers, that we learned during this rate study is there was a situation where Bitcoin miners located in the Pacific Northwest, and the reason they did that is because in the Pacific Northwest they have a lot of very cheap hydroelectricity. It's very, very cheap. Some of the cheapest electricity in the country. Well, because the load of the Bitcoin miners was so large, they had to go out and buy additional electricity on the market at a higher rate, which impacted all of the customers through the power cost adjustment. So there's that risk as well. By our very nature, a municipal utility, you're talking about public money, you're talking about customers' money, and we take that very serious. If we take risk, it puts our customers at risk, and so it's a risk that's tough to mitigate. So those are some of the concerns that we have. Those concerns are shared by my colleagues in other parts of the state. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have, if I can. Yes, sir.
The mayor said something about water use.
Yeah.
And I was not aware that this is high water usage.
When we have talked to, when we've had inquiries about it, the main discussion has been about electric use. And when we've and told them that, well, you've got to pay for your infrastructure, those conversations tend to trail off. They go find other places. But if they're cooling these, if they're having to cool these servers, then it could be, they could be a high water user. But I'm not aware of that part of their business, Andy.
When this was brought to my attention at this meeting up here, when we were going to have this meeting, I did look at the act that was passed. I think it was Act 580, I believe was the
Yes, sir. I think
number of
that's
it.
right.
And they talked about job creation. They talked about tax revenue generated. I've been by the one that's just north of here in Faulkner County, and I've seen one person there, and that's it. And I don't know what taxes that would generate at all.
As
So,
security, he's a security officer.
Yeah.
I'm not
yeah,
aware of that. I
yeah,
did not
yeah,
stop and visit
yeah,
with him, but
yeah.
that's the
To be fair, they are a very good load factor customer. That's true. And by that, I mean they utilize electricity very efficiently. They're going to be using electricity around the clock. If there's a utility that needs additional revenue and they've got the capacity to serve them and they've got a need for that, it could be good for them. But again, for us, by our very nature, we're risk averse. When we take risk, it exposes our customers to risk, and we don't like doing that. But those are two valid points. I don't know about the job creation. That's a bit of a mystery to me, if that's the case.
was to me.
Maybe there's some sales tax revenue off of I don't know, but
And
yeah.
the water that came from a conversation between myself and the county judge this morning.
Mm.
In my research of all this, I haven't noticed anything about water either.
Yeah,
Andy, I haven't.
seen
But Alan and I talking this morning. He's been talking to a lot of other county judges. He said there is that element possibly in there, but I do not know that for sure.
Well, I drive that stretch of highway on a weekly basis, and the noise that emanates from that small structure doesn't look like it's a lot bigger than this room. Would that be safe to say?
Yes.
Yes.
From that room, and it's outdoors, there is a sound that is, I mean, it'd drive you crazy if you were close to it.
I think it's the fans cooling the servers. They're constantly, working on algorithms to solve these mathematical problems to add the next step of the blockchain. And if they're successful doing that, they're rewarded with a transaction fee, and that's how they make their money.
Where's that located?
If you go up Highway 25 and
Mhm.
go through the intersection at Wooster,
Mhm.
and go up to Bono, it's on the west side of the of Highway 25, close to the Bono Church
Yeah.
that's up there, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry.
Bono Baptist.
Bono Baptist. It's just past that, and it's on the other side of the road from the church.
As soon as you get to the high wires, it's right there on your left. They're underneath that, or near. Or they're located fairly close to it. And Brett, I don't want to put you on the spot on this. Is there a finite number that they're looking for in this crypto mining? And was it you and I that had that discussion?
A finite number.
An exact number that when they get to this point, then this stops. When they get to a certain number of Bitcoin.
Not that I'm aware
That wasn't
of.
okay. That
Yeah.
wasn't the discussion you and I had.
No, sir.
Okay, I don't want to
Not
get
that
off
I'm
on that
aware.
because that's
Yeah.
I'm down a rabbit hole there.
I'm unfamiliar
I
with
have
that.
I have no knowledge of that whatsoever. That's why I was saying if you did. I think what probably got us here is what you were alluding to, Mr. Hawkins, is the noise factor. And so this time I'd like to. Do you have any questions for Brett? Okay, I want to turn on Mr. Finkenbinder.
All right, so prior to the meeting, just before I handed out just kind of a fact sheet that tries to lay out the main points of what's being proposed by this ordinance, and then This is an ordinance that we work with the municipal league to create prior to the August 1st effective date of the act. And the city attorney's office also looked at what was being done in the county. County Quorum Court, as most of y'all probably know, passed a similar ordinance to this. I think it was just last week. So, in the fact sheet that we have developed, just explains just sort of the basic questions of who will enforce it, what are the remedies, um, and in the middle you'll see an explanation briefly of what exactly this requires data centers to do. And note it's not limited to crypto mining; it's data centers, which has a specific definition in our ordinance. Let me just that real quick before I talk about some of the requirements. So, the data center, as this ordinance, proposed ordinance states, is any facility constructed or operated to engage, store, manage, process, or transmit digital data, including facilities used for cryptocurrency mining, which houses networked computer systems along with supporting equipment such as batteries, backup power generators, heating, ventilation, and cooling systems. And it specifies a decibel level, which is consistent, very close to what the county quorum court had passed. And it has a different level for daytime and nighttime operations, which the city ordinance has proposed to it would be from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. That's the nighttime, and then 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And you'll notice that the decibel levels are lower for the nighttime. The only way that the county is different is their daytime levels, I think, are a little bit higher, like 5 decibels higher, and they run daytime from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And the other significant part of the proposed ordinance is requirement for data centers prior to them beginning operations. They have to conduct sound studies, construct their facilities to what's called provide noise attenuation, which is to construct the facility in such a way that it's designed to help prevent some of the sound that's unique to these data centers. They have to provide that information to the mayor. And as you can see, there's no special fee or special license required of any data center, other than the requirements to do the studies, and they have to annually do a sound study and provide those results to the mayor. And if you look at the violation section, that's another question: is what are the remedies for violations? In the fact sheet, the remedies are fine, and the ability to request an injunction from a court by the city. But as you'll note from the ordinance, it specifically states that nothing herein would prohibit any private individual from filing to seek injunctive relief for nuisance. So the rights of individual citizens to protect the peace and safety of their property is preserved under this ordinance.
What's the limitation on the fine, Finkenbinder?
Mr. Hawkins, the limitation on the fine is contained in the Article 7 penalty section. Punished by a fine, any violation punished by a fine of $1,000 for any one specified offense or violation, or double that sum for repeat offenses.
If these people are spending the amount of money that they're spending, put these in, $1,000 and $2,000 is front pocket change.
And that's an excellent point, Mr. Hawkins. If you'll go down, the ordinance would also provides that the city can pursue all other legal and equitable remedies in order to abate the nuisance and compel compliance with this, including injunctive relief and any civil damages that a court deems appropriate. So, and that's an excellent point. I don't know what these crypto miners or data center folks make, but if it was enough to just make that like a speeding ticket, the ordinance would allow the city and private individuals, but would allow the city to pursue any injunctive relief. And injunctive relief for a court is the city would be asking a court to enjoin or stop the operations. And if a court orders that, a fine is the least of the data center's problems.
What in Andy's example, what would be an occurrence? Could it be every hour that they don't comply? Or, I mean, I'm just trying to think how quickly it could add up if code enforcement was out there.
It's the decibel levels are set forth in and this is Article 5 under limitations, noise limitations, and it makes it unlawful for any data center to make or continue to cause or permit to be made or continued noise levels constituting a disturbance. And that's calculated at 65 decibels or higher during the daytime hours, or 55 decibels or higher during the nighttime hours. And it has to be measured by a third-party acoustic engineer, which I don't know what they do, except measure sound. And it's from the property line. So, and here to answer your question, Ms. Mel, I think the standard which may be considered in determining whether a violation of the ordinance is occurring includes but is not limited to the following: the level or volume of the noise, the time of day or night the noise occurs, and the duration of the noise, and whether the noise is recurrent, intermittent, or constant, and whether proper and reasonable attenuation methods were followed and maintained. So it's not anytime the noise exceeds during the daytime 65 decibels, there's a violation. What this ordinance does, I think, is allows the city to take everything into account. And I think the intent is to seek to penalize only those entities where the sound is continuous.
Is anyone aware of an existing data center in the city limits that this would affect?
I am
I'm
not
not,
aware of
but-
any existing data centers, but I did in reviewing this ordinance with our partners in municipal league. That was one of my questions: was will this apply to only existing data centers, or does this apply to only new data centers that go into operation after the effective date of the ordinance if the council passes it? And in my opinion, as a result of those consultations, is that it would apply to any data center.
And I got a question. Do we have the equipment to measure this? Or do we have to buy this for the code enforcement to take out?
That would be a question for Mr. Clausen. I sent last night, which I'm sure he was very happy about, Mr. Clausen a copy of the proposed ordinance as a heads up, which probably wasn't much of a heads up.
Oh,
Yeah,
I appreciate it. And I
I
was
got a
able to read it.
two-part, I got a question and answer thing. And the next thing, do we have to put the bill for this?
For the equipment, I would, if we purchase it, yes.
Do we have any idea how much it costs?
I don't.
Reason why I'm saying I'm agreeing with Andy. If we just gonna give them a Band-Aid effect for a violation, they need to try to eat some of this cost before it happens. That's just me.
Obviously, we don't currently have the equipment. There's a decimeter and a noise. I looked it up. There's some meters that can read this. There's two different types. And Charles, can you repeat what you said about a third party on that?
So would we be considered the third party? We, the city, we.
That would be a question for Charles.
We need to probably look at pricing, Mr. Jones, and just contracting with a third party and someone who does this for businesses.
Yeah.
On a case by case.
Yes.
And what specifically how the ordinance reads is the decibel levels to be measured as determined by a third-party acoustic engineer. So I can't imagine that would be something that the city would purchase the equipment. This would be a services situation.
Yes,
I imagine it's gonna cost some money too when you say acoustic engineer. We're gonna talk about an hourly rate or daily rate gonna be pretty high. And if you're calling that 3 or 4 times a week at minimum, it's gonna be a whole lot more than the fine gonna be levied. That's just my opinion.
Regarding Mr. Hawkins' question earlier about how often we can give them a citation, the way I read this ordinance, and Charles might be able to clear some of this up, I believe the way it's written is that they could receive a citation for the decimal level of the daytime and at night. Since there's two different ranges there, they could fall under that for the consistent noise level. And then, potentially using the third party, we could, if we have them present to measure these decibels, accurately and then bring them into court, there's nothing to stop us from doing it daily until it's stopped. And if the first one is 1,000 and the next one is 2,000, I'm sure they're making tons of money, but eventually that would at least get them into court. And as Charles said earlier, get a ruling for it, and then it becomes a contempt issue. And that'll be a lot more problems than what is violating the city ordinance.
And to Mr. Jones's question about the third-party acoustic engineer, that's not required. That's a suggestion. And I would just point out it by way of contrast is that the county ordinance that was adopted last week does not have a requirement. So the council would be free, in my opinion, to either keep that as it is, make it an either or remove it.
As long as there's no certifications required to operate this equipment, if we can obtain it, we can use it. I'm sure it's a digital readout, take pictures, document it. And if we have to kind of adjust as this becomes a problem and decide there's a better way to do it with a third party, we'd be glad to entertain that. And this equipment, I've not searched pricing on it, so I don't even have a starting point for you.
Another thing, I got free reign today. If we talking about either or, and you being an attorney, you don't need to go to court with an either or thing when you're trying to sue somebody.
No, I meant, let me clarify. What I meant is an either or. For example, the ordinance, proposed ordinance says that it has to be determined by a third-party acoustic engineer. What I'm suggesting is that the council would have every right to propose that instead of as determined by a third-party acoustic engineer, as determined by the city or a third-party acoustic engineer, to give the city the option of choosing who actually measures the sound.
So if an individual who lives next door hired an acoustic engineer to come out and measure it and then filed the claim, you've talked about individual
You can do
citizens, that would be acceptable then.
That would be acceptable proof. But the city is not required to use a third-party engineer. It could make it an optional, and in my opinion, that makes more sense. And as the person who prosecutes code enforcement citations in the district and the circuit court, those options would definitely better protect the city's ability to enforce this ordinance.
I have a quick question on 3C, and I think D. The property owner must provide a copy of the building plan to the mayor and file with the city clerk within 30 days of completion of the plan prior to the construction. And any additions, changes, or expansion of the data center must comply with the noise. That's too big a word for me to pronounce. Requirements of this ordinance must be designed and submitted to the mayor and filed with the city clerk within 30 days. I would rather that be tied into the planning office and permitting office, because if there's going to be a structure in Conway, they're going to be up on the front end of it, and everything's going to have to be approved by them anyway. This would just add another layer to them, so that we do not miss it. It needs to be part of the original plan of any business that's coming to Conway, go through the planning department. I would rather see this added to that. That makes sense? Yeah.
I'm thinking that $1,000 and $2,000 is front pocket change money for them.
Bring any related additional expenses.
Yes.
I was going to say whether we're hiring an acoustic engineer, buying the equipment and sending code enforcement out.
Well, and if Conway Corp is going to charge them on the front end for the infrastructure, we're talking about millions of dollars, that's not pocket change. And that would be on the front end. That makes me feel good.
I think they wouldn't come at all.
I think that would be a pretty big deterrent. Yeah. I think they'd look for someplace else.
Set up that way, I fully agree.
And it's set up that way, as far as I'm understanding.
Mr. Finkenbinder, could I ask a question? I've now told y'all everything that I know about this. Now I'm getting ready to show you what I don't know.
Those are always the hardest questions for me to answer.
I got you. First of all, I apologize. I don't have my proposed ordinance in front of me. Do we have this type of business set for certain zoning in town?
Now, this ordinance does not affect the zoning where these businesses can be conducted.
The reason I asked that question is years ago, 2, 3, 4 were here at that time. You were working with the city. Sexually oriented businesses wanted to come to Conway. We laid out a place that if they wanted to come, they could come, but they had to be in a specific zoning. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't address that, address this situation that way, rather than being able to put it in a residential area, in a office area, something else. Just a question.
I saw on the news where Russellville is complaining because it's too close to churches and too close to the college. And that may be a great idea, have a zone for that, instead of just putting it like in my backyard because I got an acre back. I'm just saying it like that, see what I'm saying?
I have a question for Mr. Carroll. Would go along with Mr. Hawkins. My understanding is these are located close to substations or something like that, Brett.
Typically, that's correct.
So,
But they still, I mean, there still could be, the work you might have to do in the substation, you might have to buy another transformer. It could be $10 million, to get the distribution system in a position to serve them.
okay, so like if let's say we went with East Industrial Park.
Okay.
So y'all could bring power to them from a substation somewhere in that area, just be an additional cost to them.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. Thank you.
My other question is that I don't know the answer to. What in the world are they looking for?
Mr. Grimes explained it the best to me.
I'd love
Miss
to
Mel,
hear it.
I'm gonna let you jump on this.
I'm like you. It's a bit of a mystery, but I think it's lost cryptocurrency.
Well, now, who determines that it's lost? Let's say Mr. Garrett 10 years ago bought 10 of whatever it is they're looking
And
for,
it's just sitting out there.
and he forgot about it.
You would do that.
And it's now worth $5 million, which,
You'd remember.
well, I don't know, but I
Yeah.
mean, is that at what point does it not belong to Mr. Garrett anymore?
Mhm.
I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. Anybody out there got an answer? Yeah.
Come on up.
Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Brandon Martinez. I've been following these data centers and crypto since they've made their way to Central Arkansas. So what we do know is I followed them in the county, in Bologna. This company has repetitively lied to these councils and committees, so we don't really know exactly. The way that they have explained it is it's like a mathematical equation. Are you asking like what they're mining for?
Yeah, what are they looking for?
Okay, so it's a mathematical equation. That's what they're solving in these computers. The noise comes from the fans that they use to cool these computers. The water, they have a water system that runs on like these curtains that helps, like the fan blows through these curtains. It's like a cooling system. That's where the water comes in.
Okay. Thank you.
And so that's the water, but it's these equations, and whenever they work out, whenever they equal whatever, I don't know exactly, but when these equations are done, they're kind of paid for with a crypto. So when they say they're mining for crypto, these companies are wanting to be paid for, like, will be reimbursed for their work, these computers doing all these equations. Instead of getting $20, they're going to get a crypto. And so that's where the phrase mining for cryptocurrency comes in. because my understanding is that secure transactions, these algorithms, make transactions secure. So when a transaction is secure, they are rewarded with a crypto, not with $20,000 or something like that. That's kind of how they're paid. I don't know, like y'all said, there's not one here in Conway, but the company that has tried to put these in, that successfully put one in Bono, that tried to put one in Valonia and was stopped, there's kind of some discrepancies with kind of their legal ability in the state. And so the city, Conway, y'all having such a good planning commission and routine, that would probably also be caught in that when they're trying to implement this. Also, like y'all already alluded to, they're trying to get these in the county. They're trying to get these in Valonia. They're trying to get these in areas to where they can pass through easily, where they feel like they can pass through easily. Because they know, I don't know if y'all have heard the noise of the one out in Bono, but it is ridiculous. They have it right next to a home. She has an autistic son, and he is in fits all the time because because he can't, it overstimulates him. And they don't care. They're not being a good neighbor when they do these things. They are wanting money. One of Conway's own, State Representative Matt Brown, he went out there and looked at that and the security guard pulled out his gun, and our representative that represents many of us was on the other side of the street. This isn't a good neighbor industry. This is trying to
Pulled a gun
implement.
from across the street.
Yes, he just pulled it out, didn't point it at him,
Okay.
and that's Representative Matt Brown. So
yeah.
there's a lot of things here, and I know that this council is really taking a good look at this, and y'all are trying to get ahead of the game. It's not a good industry. It's not anything that's going to benefit our community. And I'll wrap up with this because I could ramble all day. There may be some cost alluded to this, decibel readers and things, but there's also cost when it comes to our police departments and our fire departments. But those are needed to keep a peaceful city, to keep this a place that people want to come. I would not move my family or anyone close to that Bono site. So while there may be some cost, I just would ask you to weigh cost over a city that everyone loves, because I know I sure do. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Mr. Martinez,
Thank
I don't
you,
know what you
Brandon.
do, but you've now become the expert. Would you let me know how I can get in touch with you?
Well,
Thank
and
you.
there
And
was- I was
I'm
gonna
sorry.
say,
Go ahead. No, ahead.
there was an interesting article in the Democrat Gazette today about this state law that was passed and how there is at least one state representative who thinks it needs to be repealed.
In order to be fair, after Mr. Martinez educated, is anyone here who would like to speak in favor of? Okay, council, back to you. I'll need a motion to waive the three readings.
So moved.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0. Yes, sir, Mr.
Real
Hawkins.
quick, you had asked for a change in something. I wanna make
That's
sure
when
that-
they asked
Planning
you, did you
Commission.
put that in there?
I moved that to,
Make
instead
sure
of
that
falling
that's
under
put in there.
Mr. Garrett and myself, put it under planning and permitting.
So is that, we would need a motion and a second to amend. Well, has
We
anyone made a motion to propose
Not
this
yet.
ordinance? We need to do that first.
Okay.
And then there could be a motion to amend
Okay.
with a second.
Make a motion to approve the ordinance and the emergency clause?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion?
Also some discussion about the either or part of that, who was gonna pay for the third party.
So there was a motion and a second to
Approve
approve
the
this
ordinance.
ordinance. Okay. So now is there a motion to amend the proposed ordinance?
So move.
The noise?
A motion to amend.
That's what you want to write in.
That's the noise. That's
that
the
the
noise.
crypto-
Can I play this for
I
y'all?
thought that was a train coming
Can I
through.
play this for y'all
What is
just for a
that?
second?
Is that the
Yeah,
crypto?
go ahead, Mr. Go ahead, Mr.
I
Hawkins.
stopped in front, and this is what it sounds And that's from across the street.
That's enough.
I hunt north of there. It's gonna mess up my solitude.
24 hours
That's
a
near-
day. Can you shaking your
We
head
gonna
in
give
the
her
affirmative?
150.
That's twice.
No. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to amend the wording in the ordinance specifically.
Planning commission.
Under
Uh,
Article 3.
Mhm.
No, I'm sorry, hang on.
Well, it's throughout the ordinance.
Yeah.
Where anytime the data centers under the proposed ordinance as originally submitted would require any of these studies, notices, or anything from the data centers have to be provided to the mayor and the clerk. So, as I understand it, is there a motion to amend that to require that any notice, studies, or any requirements for data centers to provide information to the city would be provided to someone other than the mayor?
Yes, the planning and the permitting department, they'll just go in line with what their job duties are. As far as any structure being built in Conway.
So maybe a mayor or his designee, or did y'all want to specify?
I'm good with designate because
I was gonna say
we're gonna put in
designee,
there,
yeah.
we're gonna turn it over to permitting.
It would give the city more flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm good with
Yeah.
that.
So is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second to amend to the mayor, the wording from city clerk and mayor to the mayor or his designee
City clerk.
and city clerk. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause with the amendments.
You have to vote on the
You gotta
amendment
do the amendments
first.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
you
right,
vote
thank
on the
you.
amendment first.
Oh,
We're gonna vote it as a group of amendments or each amendment voted
I-
on?
Well, my recommendation is you take them one at a
One at a
time,
time. Mhm.
just in case there's a difference of opinion
Right.
on. So the first amendment is an amendment to change the wording throughout the existing ordinance. Wherever it says to the mayor, it would say to the mayor or his designee, or his or her designee.
now,
There's a motion and a
a
second.
motion and a second for what Mr. Finkenbeiner just said. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 6-0. Now we need an amendment to,
The other one that the council had suggested was in the, let's see, this would be in Article 5, the noise limitation section, specifically Article 5. This would really be paragraph 1. It's not really section 1, but paragraph 1 on page 6, where it designates the decibel levels during daytime and nighttime hours. Currently, the proposed ordinance states as determined by a third-party acoustic engineer, and I'm not sure what motion hasn't been made yet, of course. But I would point out that I think the county's approach to this is probably a sound one, no pun intended, in that they have this same paragraph. They don't have the as determined by a third-party acoustic engineer. And
So you would just want to strike that out?
that would be my recommendation. That way, it would give the city maximum ability to
Flexibility.
rely on not only the code enforcement and other city employees and officers, but also would allow the city attorney's office in prosecuting these to rely on other folks who may be able to measure sound, including private individuals.
Okay, so if a neighbor to one of those calls up and says this thing is too loud, it's the engineer. Neighbor, is he gonna do that? Or is the neighbor gonna have to pay for that?
That's one of the reasons, in my view, that this particular section is problematic, because it doesn't specify who sends the person out, but it does limit the city's ability to remedy the situation for citizens, because we would be required to retain and presumably pay for a third-party acoustic engineer.
I don't think the homeowner should.
Right. And
unless there was a civil suit.
if that was removed, then code enforcement, anyone who had the ability, and this will be up to a judge, to determine sound.
Something
sound
to
level.
appropriately measure.
Correct. And then I think there's something to be said for the city's approach to be as consistent as it can with the county's approach. And so this would be one standard for determining sound levels that would apply throughout the entire county. Well, in the city and in the unincorporated areas of the county. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it makes sense to just strike that from that.
That need to be voted on as well.
Well, if there's a motion to amend the now amended ordinance to strike that, it would be a motion and a second and a
So
vote.
moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to strike the wording of this portion.
Engineer.
Correct.
Give me
Article
the exact-
5,
Article
paragraph
5,
1.
paragraph 1. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 6-0. So now we're back to our original.
Mr. Hawkins says.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hawkins.
One other thing, the determination of 65 decibels during the day, 55 at night, what does that sound like? Anything we can, because when you go to a football game and you'll see it's at about 105 decibels, it's at 108. I wonder what 55 and 65 sound like. I don't know that answer.
I don't know that answer either.
I don't have a clue. Ross, can you tell me where that might have come from? I mean, just a number we pulled out of the air?
I could get Felicia to sing and she can kind of give us a.
I can't tell you exactly that. What I can tell you before somebody smarter than me can chime in, and that would probably be, yeah.
Mr. Maddox,
I've been a sound guy for a long time.
come on, step on up here.
It's to a hair dryer. It'd be
Okay.
parts that show all
I would hate to have a hairdryer blowing in my ear all night. I mean, I'm just saying.
formal conversation.
Former
I'd
conversation.
almost rather have it.
Like when your spouse holler at you, that's what's. I'm just saying.
I hadn't used a hairdryer in a long time, so I couldn't tell you what it sounds like.
That's at night when. people
Yeah.
are trying to
The
sleep.
two things that I can add is that I think the Arkansas Association of Counties took a similar approach to the sound measurement levels as the Arkansas Municipal League. And so the values are very close. I think Mr. Maddox hit it on the head that where he described the hair dryer. And I would also point out that as the proposed ordinance is worded, sound is measured at the property line of the receiving property, meaning the property that's
Property.
receiving the sound. So a neighbor of a data center, sound would be measured under this proposed ordinance from the edge of their property. So, and
Means
presumably,
it could be louder at the actual facility.
correct. And and I think it's a fair, it strikes a really fair balance because it's really focused not on data centers or prohibiting folks from doing a data center. What it's designed because of that measuring scheme or process is to protect people and from not being able to enjoy their property due to excessive noise. So I think that's the reason that those levels were established and that measuring line was determined to be the property line of the receiving property.
Feel sorry for the young
okay
kid he
with
was talking
I
about.
know.
That's kind
I'm
of.
good, Mr. Clausen.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Thank you,
with
Mr. Maddox, Mr. Clausen.
Appreciate that, guys. Thank you. That's helpful.
Hey, council, we have a motion and a second with the amendments to adopt this ordinance with emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Be ordinance O-2355. Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Aye.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
the emergency clause, Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Aye.
Ms. Isby,
Yes.
and Ms. Mel.
Both of those pass 6-0. Thank you, everyone that showed up and offered your expertise in this matter. Thank you, council, for being here. That That's all we have for today. Then I'll take a
If
motion
I-
to adjourn.
Before, if I could just point out, I really appreciate Mr. Maddox being here and especially Mr. Clausen, who received very short notice of this from me. It says a lot that he showed up and participated.
Thank you, guys.
We're adjourned.